This lesson is to study and learn about augmented chords. Not augmented sixth chords, but just augmented chords. These are often found as triads with an altered fifth, and often they are extended beyond the fifth. We're going to talk about two different things. One is how to spell the augmented chords, and two is how they function. First of all, how to spell the augmented chords. An augmented chord is a major triad with a raised fifth. A major triad with a raised fifth. So you can take any major triad and raise the fifth a half step, and it would be an augmented chord. These are most often found as a one chord or a four chord or a five chord. Very rarely will you see any other augmented chords. And the most common of these would be the 1 and the 5. The 4 would be less common, although it also happens. One thing to be careful of is when you see the 1 augmented chord symbol, don't confuse it for an IT indicating some sort of Italian augmented sixth chord or something like that. It's just a Roman numeral 1 with a plus sign, which means a 1 chord with a raised fifth. Okay, let's practice spelling some. So let's take the key of E major. We'll put our key signature of 4 sharps, and let's spell a 1 augmented chord. Well, we go E, G sharp, B, which is we spell our basic 1 triad, and all we do is we raise the fifth. Let's say we're in the key of B major, and we put our key signature F, C, G, D, A, and you're asked to build a 4 augmented chord. Well, we start on the 4th scale degree, we build our triad, and we have E, G sharp, B, and we need to raise the fifth. E, G sharp, B sharp. Let's say we are in the key of F, and we're asked to write a 5 augmented. Well, we start in the scale degree 5. We spell our 3 notes, C, E, G, which is already major quality, so we need to raise the fifth from G to G sharp. In the major mode, you'll notice that all of these require a single accidental because the chord in the key is already major quality before we altered it. So the 1 chord in major keys is already major, the 4 chord is already major, and the 5 chord is already major, so they require 1 accidental so that the fifth is raised from major to augmented. This is not true in the minor keys. So let me get rid of all that. And let's talk about building these in minor. Let's say we are in D minor, and we are building a 1 augmented. Well, we can start on scale degree 1, build our triad, but in minor we have a DFA, which is a minor triad. First we have to make it a major triad. Then, once it's a major triad, we raise the fifth to make it augmented. let's take the same key and make a 4 augmented. We'll take scale degree 4, which is G, and build our triad in the key signature, which is G, B flat, D. But now we have to make it a major triad, G, B, D. And once it's a major triad, then we raise the 5th to D sharp, G, B, D sharp. Same will be true of the 5 chord, because in the key signature, in minor keys, the 5 chord is actually minor, A, C, E. So we have to first make it major, and then to augment it, we have to raise the 5th. One thing to notice about these chords is the intervals that exist within the triad. D, for example, up to F sharp is a major third. F sharp up to A sharp is a major third. If we did another major third up from A sharp, we would end up with C double sharped, which is essentially D. So the point here is that once you go up 2 major thirds, if you do it again, you duplicate your first note. So these chords are called equidistant chords because the intervals that exist between the notes in the chord are the same intervals. In major triads, it would be major third, minor third. Minor triads, it would be minor third, major third, and so on. So these chords are similar to diminished chords in that way that in diminished chords, everything is crunched down to its closest intervals where you have all minor thirds. In a fully diminished 7th chord, you have all minor thirds. So the chord has been compressed as far as it can go. In augmented chords, the chord has actually been expanded as far as it can go to major thirds existing between the pitches. Any farther, and it will no longer be tertian harmony, which is chords built in thirds. It would then become some other sort of harmony, chords built in fourths or something like that. But the music that we're studying is based on thirds, and so this is as far as you can stretch a chord before it begins to become something else. So these are equidistant chords. So if you have any trouble spelling them, you can always default to how many half steps exist between the notes, and you could even practice it on your instrument with the chromatic scale to make sure you're getting the right pitches. Okay, so let's go back to our original augmented triad that we wrote. C, E, G sharp. And the key is C. 1 augmented. Now this chord generally does one of 2 things. Number 1, this G sharp could move up to A, and the other notes might stay in place. And in that case, it would move to a 6 chord in first inversion. So that would be more of a part writing, a contrapuntal use of the chord, where it's more about this voice leading than it is about chord function. The second way that this chord might be used is more of a secondary dominant, in which case it would go to the 4 chord, and the bass note would probably jump down to F, down below. And in this case, it would be 2 notes moving instead of just the 1, and so you actually have a chord function in this sense that this 1 chord then acts like a 5 plus of 4, moving to 4. So in this case, when this happens, we would just write 1 plus to 4, but if you wrote 5 plus of 4 to 4. That would be a very intuitive way of thinking about it, because that is what's happening. It's being actually treated as a dominant function chord, moving to 4, perfect fifth down. In this case, this is simply a counterpoint thing. This note is moving, these notes are staying the same. The chord is a byproduct of this voice leading, which is the primary thing happening. So in cases like this, usually this chord is preceded by its diatonic version. Let me show you that up here. So often it will happen where the chord will happen in its diatonic version, and then there will be an alteration of that, and then it will move to the next note, which would be the A. And what's happening here is G goes to G sharp, goes to A, and the harmonic analysis will be 1, 1 augmented to 6 first inversion. But you could also say that it's just simply 1 and a 1 chord again, and you could call this note a non-chord tone. In specific terms, you could call it a chromatic passing tone. If you were to analyze it that way, it would be correct. So there would be two analyses for this up here. It could be 1 to 1 augmented, or it could be 1, still 1, with a passing tone going to this chord. Okay, those are the basic ways the chord functions, either as a contrapuntal chord or a dominant function chord. And the examples I've shown here are all based on the 1 chord, but you could do the same thing with 5 chords and 4 chords, the other two most common augmented chords. At this point, I want to let you see a little video so you can hear some sound, and then that will conclude this video. So pay attention to this next little segment, and it will reinforce some of these things and let you see some of these things. Alright, here are a couple of musical examples of augmented chords in pop music. The Beatles were partial to them. This one is John Lennon's Just Like Starting Over. Our love together is so precious. Together we have grown. We have grown. In this song, he starts off, it's in A, starts off with an A, C sharp, E, and then it moves A, C sharp, E sharp, then it goes to A, C sharp, F sharp with this A pedal. And so what's happening here is it's a 1 chord going to an augmented 1 chord to a first inversion 6 chord, F sharp, A, C. Then it comes back, and he plays around with that. So in this case, we have a 1 chord that has a moving line here with E, E sharp, F sharp. So it could actually be analyzed as 1, and then when this note moves E to E sharp, it could be analyzed as a chromatic passing tone to F sharp, and then a 6 chord in first inversion. So there's 2 valid analyses here. 1 passing tone, 6 first inversion, or 1 augmented, 6 first inversion. So there's both of those analyses would be okay. Another song in the same key, actually, but now he does the augmented chord. Beatles, John Lennon in particular here, does the augmented chord on the 5 chord. The E, G sharp, B becomes E, G sharp, E sharp. You might recognize it. Oh, darling, please believe me, I'll never do you no harm. Sorry for the flubs, but the idea here is that we have A is the key, but we start off with this 5 chord, E, G sharp, B sharp. And I'm doubling the E on the top. E, G sharp, B sharp, E, which in this case moves directly to A, so that augmented note cannot really be called a passing tone because it lasts for the duration of the chord. It doesn't move while the chord is still in force. It only changes when there's a new chord. So this is an actual 5 augmented. Oh, going to 1. So the other one was 1 augmented. This one is 5 augmented. And these are the two most common ways you're going to find these chords, as 1 chords or 5 chords. When they're 5 chords, they almost always go right to 1. When they're 1 chords, sometimes they move the way that it did here to a 6 chord in first inversion. Sometimes it moves up a 4th, which would be a D chord in this case, to the 4 chord. So it could act as a 5 of D, a 5 of 4 in this case. So it could be a secondary dominant. So these augmented chords often behave as dominant function chords, even if they're not starting off as dominant chords. They could be a secondary dominant, or in the case of the other song we did, it could go to the 6th chord as a passing function.